If you have already watched this introductory information, you can skip ahead no more than 9 minutes. Hello, welcome. I am predicting that famous singer-songwriter Paul Simon of Simon and Garfunkel will die on August 12th, 2025. This time-stamped email proves that this prediction that Paul Simon will die on August 1st, 2025 has been known since November 9th. We can see here the timestamp November 9th, 2024. On November 8th, 2024, we received the relevant prophetic signs related to Paul Simon. And as I wrote right here, God was pointing to November 8th ahead of time because Simon's death will point to Revelation chapter 8, verse 1. And this is the reason why Paul Simon will die on August 1st, 2025. In short, the date 8:1 and 11:8 hint at Revelation 8:1 in the Bible, which describes a period of silence that was observed in heaven. Paul Simon's first hit was Sound of Silence. As I wrote right here, it is exactly 38 weeks between November 8th and August 1st, 2025, and Paul Simon is predicted to die at the age of 83, for which 38 weeks hints at. All right, the analysis that God was pointing to August 1st was 100% correct. However, Paul Simon did not die on August 1st. Instead, God provided clear and relevant signs related to Paul Simon, which revealed adding 11 more days, including the sale of the storied mansion in Los Angeles for $110 million. 110 hints at the number 11, and Paul Simon is associated with mansion symbolism in God's signs, primarily because, for example, his biggest solo album is Graceland, and the song Graceland is about him traveling to Elvis Presley's mansion. 11 days after August 1st, which was again known since November of 2024, will be August 12th, the date it is predicted now that Paul Simon will die. And so, in other words, if you are reasonable, it is clear that essentially I predicted Paul Simon's death back on November 9th, 2024. Yes, it wasn't August 1st, but like I just said or explained, and it'll be explained much more in detail in other videos, 11 days was revealed through the prophetic signs on August 1st, which gets us to August 12th. And so in other words, again, back in November 9th, 2024, I predicted that Paul Simon would die on August 12th. If you have the eyes to see that. It's really quite simple and clear. I predicted August 1st, but again, it revealed 11 days to August 12th. And so essentially, back on November 9th, I predicted that Paul Simon would die on August 12th. A dirty bomb is a conventional explosive that uses radioactive material. I am predicting that 3 dirty bombs will explode in New York City, in Times Square, Penn Station, and Grand Central Station. There will then be a massive evacuation from Manhattan Island. I am predicting that these 3 dirty bombs will explode on either August 30th or September 4th. I am also predicting that a dirty bomb will explode in the port of Los Angeles on September 4th. I am predicting that Tehran, Iran, will be nuked by the US or possibly Israel on September 7th, 2025. This will obviously be in response to the dirty bombs that are predicted to explode in New York City. I am predicting that Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom will die in a plane crash in St. Louis as they are traveling from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles in Busch Stadium in St. Louis on August 2nd, 2028. This will be during the predicted presidential campaign of Gavin Newsom. As a result of Gavin Newsom's death, Michelle Obama will become the Democrat Party's presidential nomination. Michelle Obama will, quote unquote, win the election over J.D. Vance on November 7th, 2028, and will become the president on January 20th, 2029. Donald Trump is predicted to run as J.D. Vance's vice president. This scheme to overcome the 22nd Amendment will backfire and inspire Michelle Obama and Barack Obama to run on the ticket with Barack Obama as Michelle Obama's vice president. She will then step down and Barack Obama will become the president again. It is predicted that there will be a massive Mary apparition on the beach in Rio, Brazil on April 24th, 2029. It is now recognized that there will be 2 massive Mary apparitions on the beach in Rio. The first of the 2 is predicted to be on March 22nd, 2029. These predicted Mary apparitions will not be secretive. They will be mainstream, worldwide news. Like all Mary apparitions in history, including at Lourdes, Guadalupe, and Fatima, this Mary apparition will be a demon pretending to be Mary. It is predicted that on April 26th, 2029, the key will open the bottomless pit and fallen angels will cross over into the earthly realm. April 26th, 2029 will be a symbolic beginning to the 5th trumpet judgment that is described in Revelation chapter 9, when the demonic realm collides with the earthly realm. April 26th, 2029 will be a symbolic beginning to demons pretending to be aliens. The demons pretending to be aliens will claim to be here to help us with our nuclear weapons. It is predicted that Pope Francis will be resurrected from the grave on April 26th, 2029, and it is possible that on this day, Pope Francis will announce that aliens have arrived and have made him the ambassador for the world. This will immediately give Pope Francis, the Antichrist, supreme power over governments of the world. April 26th, 2029 will be a symbolic beginning to a zombie pandemic and the masses becoming demonically possessed that will be facilitated through the thing, which is the mark of the Antichrist and 5G frequencies. April 26th, 2029 will be a symbolic beginning to the coming genocide politicide in America. The resurrection rapture event will occur on Pentecost on May 27th, 2029. On September 11th, 2029, there will be a catastrophic asteroid hit of Earth in the Indian Ocean. The greatest seismic effect of this will be felt on the other side of the globe, which is North America, and this will trigger an eruption of Yellowstone volcano and will cause the volcano in the Canary Islands to collapse into the Atlantic Ocean and send a mega tsunami towards the East Coast. It will also trigger the collapse of the Hoover Dam, which will cause a water panic in California, and many other devastating earthquakes. The day of the Lord, the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ, Judgment Day, will be at the end of 2031. The date that this video is posted proves that these predictions are being made ahead of time, as do these time-stamped emails and forensic notes PDF documents. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. All right, welcome. This video is predicting that famous singer-songwriter Paul Simon of Simon and Garfunkel will die on August 12th, 2025. The date that this video is posted on the social media platform that you are watching it on proves that this prediction is being made ahead of time. That said, it has been known through God's big picture of prophetic signs that Paul Simon is very important and that his death will be a massive prophetic sign and a warning to America of judgment and destruction. But we can see also here, and there have been videos that have been posted prior to today, and it has been known, well, it has been known since November of 2024 that Paul Simon would die in August of 2025, as I've explained, probably at the beginning of this video. Okay, so I won't explain it again. But anyway, here in this email, you can see this particular prophetic sign occurred on August 6th. That's why the late hour for this video is because this video, or rather the information in this video, the prophetic signs occurred on August 6th, just 2 + 2 + 2 days before Paul Simon is predicted to die on August 12th. And I'll explain why it is 2 + 2 + 2 days from these prophetic signs. It's truly profound. So in other words, God has done these prophetic signs at the last minute here, if you will, just a couple of days before Simon's death. All right, now as I'm about to explain, the signs on August 6th gave us the number 2, but there was a series of 2s. The thing is that God was also pointing to August 8th, and we received the relevant, clear signs that were expected on August 8th that revealed adding 4 days to get August 12th for the date of Paul Simon's death. And what I mean by clear and relevant signs, I mean clear and relevant signs to Paul Simon on August 8th. And the reason why August 8th, the date 8/8, is because it is more symbolism for Revelation chapter 8, which God is using Paul Simon to point to, including for primarily, well, not primarily actually, but one thing is the first verse of Revelation chapter 8, which describes a period of silence that was observed in heaven. And Paul Simon's first big hit, as in the first verse of Revelation 8, his first hit was Sound of Silence, and this hit launched his career. So Paul Simon, in other words, is known for Sound of Silence, and that's why God is using Paul Simon to point to Revelation chapter 8, which begins with the sound of silence in heaven, and that's why the date 8/8, which was 2 days after August 6th. And so it was believed at one point that because God was pointing to August 8th and 12th, it was believed that August 8th would be a step and that Paul Simon would die on the 12th. But then I reconsidered the analysis and postulated that possibly Paul Simon would die on August 8th. And the reason why God was pointing to August 12th as well was, in fact, that would be the day of his funeral. So that's why God was pointing to the 2 dates 4 days apart. But as it turns out, August 8th was just a step, like it was initially thought. And these signs on August 6th that give us this series of 2s that I'll just explain in a minute were for adding 2 + 2 + 2 days. This in itself hints at 2 times 2 times 2 times, this hints at 2 times 2 times 2, which equals 8. In other words, a series of 3 2s hints at 8, because 8 is 2 times 2 times 2. Okay, so that's why hidden in this is a 2 + 2 + 2 days count from these signs that involve the number 2. And I'm going to explain it in a second in more detail, but I'm just going to introduce this video by saying that this video was originally produced prior to August 8th, and there will be mention of adding 2 days to get from August 6th to August 8th. But ignore that when you hear that and realize what I'm saying now is that these 2s are for revealing adding 2 + 2 + 2 days, not 2 days. 2 + 2 + 2 days from August 6th gets us to August 12th, not August 8th with 2 days. And so again, just be aware once you listen to the rest of this video that it was made prior to August 8th with that understanding that August 8th was the day. It's still before August 12th that I'm producing this video now. And so let's let me mention here that the signs we're going to explain or talk about are the 22 begins with an MR and also then ends with a MA things, contracts for these things that were canceled by RFK Jr. on this August 6th date. A major important sign. And RFK Jr. in God's signs is one of the two witnesses that he is using as his voice, God's voice, to speak truth. And specifically with RFK Jr., the truth about the thing, and you know what I'm talking about, which is related to the contracts that he canceled, the 22 of them, and related to the CBD disease, etc. So, also, I will also talk about later as another prophetic sign that occurred on August 6th, which was the announcement that Mel Gibson's Resurrection movie would be released in 2 parts in 2 years, which was another 22, because the number 22 symbolizes the mark of the Antichrist. I'll explain that in a second. So that was another sign that gave us these twos. Mel Gibson's Passion of the Christ, followed by this Resurrection movie, is a prophetic sign from God, and that does make sense. And also this 22 by contracts canceled by one of the 2 witnesses, all right? So anyway, that's just the foundation here for why we know it's for adding 2 + 2 + 2 days. And again, one more time, I'll just say it. Keep in mind that this video was produced prior to August 8th, when it was believed that these signs were for the purpose of revealing adding 2 days. But now we know it's 2 + 2 + 2 days. On August 6th, RFK Jr., head of the HHS department, announced that contracts for the M, middle letter is R, last 2 letters are NA, thing, and you know what I'm talking about, the thing research, are being canceled. 22 contracts worth $500 million have been canceled. That's a typo. I forgot to put the million in there. All right. And so G500 in the Strong's Greek Concordance is the word for Antichrist. The number 22 in God's big picture of signs is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist. Because the inverse of the mark of the Antichrist that is described in the book of Ezekiel would have been a Tav mark, and the Tav letter is the last and 22nd letter out of 22 letters, is the last and 22nd letter of the alphabet. The mark of the Antichrist is described in the last book and 22nd book out of 22 books in the Bible that have a total of 22 chapters. And also, the mark of the Antichrist alters a person's chromosomes. And chromosomes come in pairs, and each of the 2 chromosomes in the pair have 2 arms each. So 2 and 2, which hints at 22. Because again, the chromosomes are altered. That's what makes a person marked when they have taken the mark of the Antichrist, which is the thing. And the thing, begins with an MR, ends with an NA thing. That thing is the mark of the Antichrist. It is not a supposed precursor to the mark of the Antichrist. It is the mark of the Antichrist in its current form. It does not need an additional something to go with it, such as an additional technology or false form of religious worship. For those who are wise, it did come with a false form of religious worship, leftist politics. And also, it does not need a supposed new age of dispensation after supposedly all quote-unquote Christians will be raptured. In fact, one of the main reasons why the vast majority of quote-unquote Christians have already taken the mark of the Antichrist is that it is judgment for this particular doctrine, which is the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day that Jesus said he hates and is coming to make war with the sword of his mouth on those that teach and have the works that are a product of this doctrine. And he says that he hates this doctrine, the Nicolaitan doctrine, in the book of Revelation regarding the end times. And that doctrine is what gives us dispensationalism, The dispensationalism is the package in which free grace or cheap grace comes in. With its close cousin, sovereign grace, which comes in the package of Calvinism. This is the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day, and when the prediction comes to pass, it'll prove this. And it'll also prove that the thing is the mark of the Antichrist. And that is the purpose of this prediction that is from God. Make no mistake. I know far better than you the reason and purpose for this prediction that is from God, and it is to prove the controversial things that I am saying. These controversial things that are overwhelmingly demonstrated to be true through God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel, which will be proven to be true when the prediction comes to pass, and that's why God will make this prediction come to pass, to prove this channel and the controversial things that I am saying that are demonstrated through his big picture of signs. And so, the commonly held objections that people have based on their understanding of Bible prophecy regarding how the begins with an MR, ends with an NA thing isn't the mark of the Antichrist are not true when the prediction comes to pass. And so the debate will be over. There will be no more discussion when the prediction comes to pass, and that's the purpose of the prediction, to end the controversy. Okay, and I'm not saying that there isn't going to be a new form of this thing in the future. And I'm not saying also that one cannot repent after having taken the mark of the Antichrist. There is nowhere in Bible prophecy that says that. Okay? And the commonly held objections that people have, such as the forehead and the hand and all of that, those objections are answered in the must-watch snake bite video on this channel. But again, make no mistake, the prediction will prove that these commonly held objections are not correct. That's the purpose of the prediction. Okay, so let's continue, but that's good to get that out of the way here, because that's the subject of this video, the mark of the Antichrist, the thing, which is what God is using RFK Jr. for. Because RFK Jr. is one of the two witnesses described in Bible prophecy who speak truth for God. That's another controversial thing that will be proven to be true when the prediction comes to pass. It was never meant to be that all quote-unquote Christians would clearly know who the two antichrists are, etc. It's just like how Jesus said, for those who can see it, John the Baptist was Elijah. The point is that not everyone will see that. That's the point. God intended it to be that way. It's the same as people saying that, well, the reason why the mark of the Antichrist couldn't possibly be the mark of the Antichrist is because my priest or my pastor would have told me. Well, that's not how it works. Furthermore, Jesus forbid priests and pastors. He said there was only one teacher. And anyway, I've spoken about that enough in other videos. And of course it was meant to be that not everyone would recognize that it is the mark of the Antichrist. And even possibly the majority of quote-unquote Christians not recognize that it is the mark of the Antichrist. Okay, and there's good reason for that. Very good reason for like I just alluded to. And it's related to the Nicolaitan doctrine, which actually talks about once saved, always saved. And it is this doctrine, the root of the bad tree that's producing the bad fruit. And the reason why the Antichrist is coming now is because God is very, very displeased with the American evangelical church. But he reproves whom he loves. All right. Okay, so the second of the two witnesses announced or trumpeted that the MR ends with the letters NA, things are not safe, and that 22 contracts are canceled 2 days before it is predicted that Paul Simon will die at the age of 83. 83 is the 23rd prime number, and begins with an MR and ends with an NA. thing alters a person's 23 pairs of chromosomes. The death of Paul Simon will point to the sound of silence in heaven in Revelation chapter 8. Paul Simon also points to the bridge that demons will cross when they emerge from the bottomless pit, as described in the fifth trumpet of judgment that follows the sound of silence in heaven. Simon and Garfunkel's fifth album was Bridge Over Troubled Water. Okay, so Paul Simon, this is just scratching the surface of why or how God is using Paul Simon. His big first hit was Sound of Silence, which is described in the beginning of chapter 8, which is why he's predicted to die on the date 8/8. And also following that period of silence in heaven that's described, there is the trumpets of judgment, and one of them is the fifth trumpet, which involves a bridge the demons will cross over, and Simon and Garfunkel's fifth album was Bridge Over Troubled Water. And Paul Simon's name equals 500, and his only solo number one hit was 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover, and on, with the number 5 in Paul Simon. Mass shootings symbolize the begins with an MR and ends also with an NA, thing, consumption. Okay, so mass shootings symbolize the thing consumption by the masses. And 5 days before RFK Jr.'s announcement regarding the begins with an MR and also then ends with an NA things was the day of the prophetic mass shooting at the Owl Bar in the 41st state. Simon was born in 41. The word key that opens the door through which the demons will cross and then go over the bridge is equal to 41 in simple English gematria, and music composition, which Paul Simon does, involves keys. Anyway, Simon was born in 41, hence the mass shooting at the Owl Bar in the 41st state. 41 is also the 13th prime number, and in the Bible, the number 13 is symbolic of the Antichrist. And again, we are talking about the mark of the Antichrist here. Simon's last tour date in promotion of his new album that depicts owls on its cover art. Okay, so the new album has owls on the cover art, and that's why the mass shooting was in the Owl Bar in the 41st state. Okay, and so the last tour date in promotion of this new album that depicts owls on the cover art was the same day that RFK Jr. made his announcement regarding the begins with an R and then also ends with an NA thing. Simon's last concert on August 6th was in Seattle, which God is using in general for the Space Needle that is in Seattle. The Space Needle is symbolic of transhumanism thing technology, right? Because it's the Space Needle, and space is a hint at transhumanism technology, space age, space technology, etc. I mean, that's why it was, I'm sure, called the Space Needle, because it was built in the 60s, and that would have been the type of vocabulary that they would have used to describe futuristic technology, because it was the World's Fair. So the Space Needle. Okay, and that's amazing because transhumanism thing technology begins with an MR and then also ends with an NA thing. But there's more to this Seattle connection here. But Paul Simon's last tour date was the same day that RFK Jr. made his announcement regarding the thing. And Seattle is known for things, the Space Needle. Now, Elvis Presley famously promoted the polio thing by taking one of them prior to a concert. It can't be understated how important Elvis Presley taking the polio thing was. I think back in 56 or 58 or something. It was extremely important in the history of things. It popularized and made it acceptable, popular, etc., for the baby boomer generation. In other words, had Elvis Presley not taken the thing that day, history would have been entirely different regarding the thing. And so that's why God is using this, the king of rock and roll. Now, the king of rock and roll with his mansion in Graceland in Memphis is symbolic of a king's palace in Memphis, Egypt. And the king of Egypt in the Bible is symbolic of the type or symbolic of the Antichrist. He persecuted the Israelites. The Antichrist will persecute Christians. Okay, and so true Christians, that is, because there will be quote-unquote Christians on the side of the Antichrist, as there already was during the years of the CVD disease. Okay, so we're painting the picture here. We're connecting Paul Simon to the Space Needle and Elvis Presley here now, because his last concert was at the Space Needle, or near it anyway. And Elvis Presley was at the Space Needle, or rather near it, when he was at the World's Fair to film a movie. And that was after he took the thing. Now, and he's responsible largely for the thing industry. Now, Simon's best-selling solo album was Graceland. The song Graceland is about Elvis's mansion. Elvis covered Simon's song Bridge Over Troubled Water. Simon's Bridge Over Troubled Water single sold 1.6 million copies. 1.6 hints at 16 and 4 times 4. The Graceland Mansion is in the 4 times 4th state. The number 4 in God's signs is symbolic of the door, because the 4th letter of the Hebrew alphabet is the symbol for a door. And the door symbolism in God's signs is the same symbolism as a bridge. And Simon's big hit was Bridge Over Troubled Water. And the door in the book of Revelation is opened with a key. And Simon composes music, which uses music keys. And again, Simon was born in 41, and key is equal to 41 in simple English gematria. A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3. It is a key that opens the door to the bottomless pit to the demons in the 5th trumpet judgment, like I was mentioning the 5th trumpet judgment earlier. These demons will demonically possess people who have taken the mark of the Antichrist. And actually, it says that this will be the case in that prophecy, the 5th trumpet, that the demonic possession of people will be for 5 months. Again, 5th trumpet, and also Paul Simon's association with the number 5, as I mentioned. And also Bridge Over Troubled Water was the 5th and last album of Simon and Garfunkel. And so, the opening line of the song Graceland is, the Mississippi Delta was shining like a national guitar. The demonic possession will be facilitated by 5G frequencies. Again, it is described in the 5th trumpet judgment. And the demonic possession will last for 5 months, but it'll be a result of 5G frequencies, and music is frequencies. And that's why Paul Simon also. And these 5G frequencies will trigger in the brain of people delta brainwaves, which will engender demonic possession. Delta is the 4th letter of the Greek alphabet, and we get the word delta from dalat, the 4th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, which is a symbol for a door, which is what will be opened to the bottomless pit for the demons to come through and then demonically possess people who have taken the mark of the Antichrist through delta brainwaves. Demonic possession equals shining. Okay, so the Mississippi Delta was shining like a national guitar. The movie The Shining starred Shelley Duvall, and Paul Simon famously dated Shelley Duvall and famously or infamously broke up with her at the airport, as in portal, as in door to the demonic realm, before she flew to the UK to film The Shining. The movie The Shining is about demonic possession and also demonic possession of a massive hotel, which is mansion symbolism, which also ties back to Paul Simon and Elvis Presley with the Graceland Mansion. And that's why, because the song Graceland is about the Graceland Mansion, and the Mississippi Delta was shining like a national guitar. Incidentally, the word Mississippi is unique in that there are 2 letters that are repeated 4 times. That gives us 4 and 4. The Antichrist is the 44th president. Who will enforce the mark of the Antichrist, which will engender the shining or the demonic possession of people? The king of rock and roll's mansion in Memphis, in Little Egypt, is symbolic of the king's palace in Egypt. And again, Memphis is named after Memphis, Egypt. The Israelites escaped the king of Egypt in the Bible after 400 years of affliction. RFK Jr. made his announcement regarding the begins with an MR and also then ends with an NA things 400 days, which is hinted at with the 400 years in the Bible. And there's this connection to Little Egypt, like I'm saying, because of Graceland and all that in Little Egypt, America. 400 days after the U.S. government. Okay, so RFK Jr. made his announcement regarding the things, the mark of the Antichrist, 400, and again, the king of Egypt persecuted, and the mark of the Antichrist is for the purpose of persecution. 400 days after the U.S. government, as in RFK Jr. announcing for the U.S. government regarding the begins with an MR and then also ends with an NA things. Okay, 400 days. He made that announcement 400 days after the U.S. government awarded Moderna, which is the pioneer of the begins with an MR and also then ends with an NA. This company was awarded 4 times $44 million for begins with an MR and then also ends with an NA thing research on July 2nd, 2024. It's an exact 400 days. And the grant was for 4 times $44 million. That's an astounding thing because, again, this confirms that the thing, the begins with an MR and then also ends with an NA, is the mark of the Antichrist that will trigger demonic possession of the demons that have crossed from the demonic realm through the door. And the number 4 is equal to door in God's signs. In God's signs, the number 9 symbolizes God's judgment. Elvis's hit song Little Egypt was on his 9th soundtrack album. RFK Jr., the head of HHS, made his announcement regarding the begins with an MR and then also ends with an NA things exactly 9 plus 9 plus 9 weeks after he first testified in Congress for his position as head of HHS. And again, he's one of the 2 witnesses, and that's why his testimony, as in the testimony of the 2 witnesses in Bible prophecy. So this was the first day that he testified, which is a very big prophetic sign. Obviously, he's one of the 2 witnesses, and he's testifying. What is he testifying about? The thing that God is using him for. RFK Jr. is God's voice regarding the truth, regarding the thing. That's, by the way, why RFK Jr. has an issue with his voice. It's symbolic of how he is God's voice. Speaking truth. And the haters of truth and the lovers of lies are against RFK Jr. for that reason, because they're aligned with Satan and they don't know it. Now, but the connection here with Elvis and the number 9, because it symbolizes God's judgment, is that the announcement here, because of Elvis's 9th soundtrack album, on which is the song Little Egypt, RFK Jr., his announcement was exactly 9 plus 9 plus 9 weeks, and God repeats the number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning, after he first testified in Congress, okay? As he was being considered for the position of the head of HHS. Now, the first day of testimony of RFK Jr.'s was on the date January 29th, the date 129. Okay, in 2025. G129 in the Greek concordance is the word meaning blood. So that's why RFK Jr. testified on this date that hints at blood. Because the begins with an MR and then also ends with an NA thing is put into people's blood, and it poisons their blood. It's all about the blood, and that's how the mark marks people, through the blood. January 29th was also the day that a passenger plane collided with a Black Hawk helicopter in Washington, D.C., which was a prophetic sign that pointed to the doping scandals in the figure skating world, which itself hints at begins with an MR and then also ends with an NA scandal. It is the biggest scandal in all of history. But okay, so let's just go back here. The plane collided with, first of all, it's in the air. Like I was saying, it's 5G frequencies that will demonically possess people. And Satan in the Bible is called the prince of the power of the air. That's why the air will be used to demonically possess people and trigger the delta brainwaves. And also music is frequencies and in the air. But these planes collided in the air. So another more symbolism for the prince of the power of the air. But God has been in general using helicopters in his science to symbolize a couple of things. They symbolize the dragon with the tails of the helicopters. That's a long story, and I don't just draw that from nothing, right? I have more than 7 years of full-time watching God's signs to know these things. And so that's one thing that helicopters in general symbolize. But also the rotor blades typically are 4 blades, and that hints at an X, which God is using to symbolize the mark of the Antichrist. Because, for example, the inverse of the mark of the Antichrist that I mentioned earlier in the book of Ezekiel would have been a Tav mark, which was an X. So the X is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist. By the way, that's why the 2 eclipses that passed over each other and right over Little Egypt, over America, hint at the mark of the Antichrist. And Little Egypt because the king of Egypt persecuted the Israelites. And he's symbolic of the Antichrist, who will persecute Christians through the mark of the Antichrist. So that's another reason for the helicopter, okay? Now, the thing, though, about that story, if you recall, the plane was carrying, most of the passengers on the plane were from the U.S. Olympic figure skating team. Okay, and there's lots of amazing things to this story, and I can't just make the video. I've already made the video. There's no point in talking about an hour about it because that's what it would take. But it pointed to the figure skating community in general. I mean, the part of the story too was how Nancy Kerrigan was in tears on the day of the accident or the day after because some of the members were from her club in Boston. And on and on. So, I mean, it was all, and she is also symbolic of scandal and figure skating because of her and the other girl that were rivals years ago, if you recall. And I think that's her name, Nancy Kerrigan. I forget the other girl's name, but that was all a big scandal too. So it's all about scandal in the figure skating community, which is about, and that's because it's and there's proof of this, which is, like I said, I don't remember the details, and it's in the other video. But there's details that confirm all of this. But the figure skating community is symbolic of these things, the doping scandals, and doping, what do they use to do the doping? They use these things. Like in Seattle, there's a Space Needle, right? They use those things. That's why the symbolism. That's why the figure skating team was on this plane on the day that RFK Jr. was testifying about the Space Needles. You see what I'm saying? All right, so Paul Simon equals bridge, which is the same symbolism as door, which is the same symbolism as a gate. 2 days before Simon's predicted death, Lionsgate, what do you call it, a film production, or rather a film distributor, announced that Mel Gibson's Resurrection movie will be released in 2 parts in 2 years, which hints at 22, the mark of the Antichrist. The resurrection and rapture will take place as an escape of God's faithful from the mark of the Antichrist, which is symbolized by the number 22, I should say. So this is another sign that occurred on August 6th. Besides the announcement of 22 contracts, we had the announcement of the Resurrection movie being in 2 parts and being released in 2 years. And that was literally part of the story. It'll be released in 2 parts, but it won't be for a couple of years, 2027. 2 years. That's amazing, because it's the same day as the 22 contracts sign. Okay? And it's Lion's Gate. The lion in the Bible prophecy is symbolic of Christ. So he'll be opening the gate, if you will, for the resurrection rapture. Okay? All right. As I mentioned, just continuation, which hints at 22. The 2 parts of the movie in 2 years. This was the same day as the cancellation of the 22 begins with an MR and then also ends with an NA thing contracts. The rapture will be a resurrection and escape of God's faithful from the begins with an MR and then also ends with an NA thing that is the mark of the Antichrist. And that wraps it up for this video. Okay, so now the rest of this video was produced on August 8th and August 9th. So after it was learned that August 8th would be a step, revealed more, adding 4 more days, etc., like I mentioned at the beginning of this video. So August 6th, 2025, and the 22 begins with an MR and then also ends with an NA contracts were canceled by one of the 2 witnesses, and it was announced that the Resurrection movie would be released in 2 parts in 2 years. Also, August 6, 2025 was Paul Simon's last concert. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier, but this is really important. I probably did. So that's why this prophetic sign relates to Paul Simon. This was the day of his last concert, and it was near the Space Needle. The Space Needle hints at all of the, as I mentioned earlier, the begins with an MR and then ends with also NA thing. Okay, I explained that earlier, which alters a person's 23 pairs of chromosomes. Simon is predicted to die at the age of 83, which is the 23rd prime number, 2 times 3 days, which ends at 23, after his last concert near the Space Needle. That makes all the sense in the world. His last concert, which points to the chromosomes that are altered by the Space Needle, would be 2 times 3 days. That's amazing. To his death from the last concert at the Space Needle, because 23 is the hints at the 23 chromosomes that are altered from the Space Needle thing. Simon's predicted death will be 2 + 2 + 2 days after one of the 2 witnesses canceled 22 begins with an MR and then also ends with an NA contracts, and Resurrection was said to be released in 2 parts in 2 years. Again, the number 22 is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist, which is the Space Needle. Okay, now speaking of the thing, we have this revelation here. So the date 86 hints at, God uses the number 86 for this. So 86 hints at this. H86, the 86th word in the Hebrew concordance, is the word in Greek, or Hebrew I should say, for bow the knee. As in bow the knee to Satan when you take the mark of the Antichrist, which is the thing. G86, the 86th word in the Greek concordance, is the word Hades, as in hell. Okay, and that's quite something given the signs we just mentioned, which is the 22 contracts for the thing, the mark, which if you take, you're bowing the knee and you're going to hell, as Bible prophecy says. Okay? Now, what's amazing about this is we have this connection here. We know from studying God's signs from morning until night for more than full-time hours for more than 7 years that this is very important, 11 months and 23 days. That's because it hints at the number 1123. And that's because God uses that number frequently in his signs, because it is the 188th prime number. God uses the number 188 frequently because the 188th word in the Hebrew concordance is the word for woe exclamation mark, which is used in the Bible in the context of extreme judgment from God, including the book of Revelation, which talks about the mark of the Antichrist. The book of Revelation also talks about how people will get sores all over their body, those who have taken the mark of the Antichrist. And that's because the mark of the Antichrist messes up their immune system. And these people will be susceptible to these diseases, such as monkeypox. Okay, that's what monkeypox is prophetically pointing to, the coming sores in Revelation chapter 16. Okay, and so from this big prophetic sign, RFK Jr., the witness for the voice of God for the truth about the thing, and him canceling the 22 contracts because of the 22 number symbolizing the mark of the Antichrist, this gives us a woe connection to the day that the World Health Organization declared monkeypox. It was an emergency warning or something on August 14th, 2024. In other words, this date symbolizes monkeypox. And that's why we have this woe connection to the thing cancellation thing by RFK Jr. Okay, and that's why this is amazing too, with the H, bow the knee, and the G86, Hades hell. Now, the first monkeypox report during the outbreak in 2022 was May 18th. So this was another symbolic date for monkeypox. The World Health Organization officially announced this first case on May 18th, 2022. This 6/8 date, so that's a typo, should say 8/6. This August 6th date with the RFK Jr. sign regarding the thing, the mark of the Antichrist, is 322%. And it's actually 322.19. So it's really close to 322% of a calendar year. And that's because God is using this number 322 to hint at Genesis 3:22, which is the verse that symbolizes the mark of the Antichrist in a way. Because it symbolizes the first lie told ever by Satan, which was told to Eve in the Garden of Eden, which is that she shall surely not die. Well, Genesis 3:22 hints at the immortality through the lie, and the big lie at the end of the age through the lie from Satan, promising immortality without God. That's the big lie. And the lie at the end of the age will be the same as the lie at the beginning of the age. The coming lie will be the space needle, the transhumanism technology that will provide for people extension of life and ultimately immortality without God. That's why God is using this 322 or combinations of 3 and 22 in his signs. And that's completely appropriate for this connection here because, like I'm saying, we have this big prophetic sign symbolizing the mark of the Antichrist on this 8/6 date, and it connects to the monkeypox symbolic date. So it's amazing. Now, also I imagine, because people will want to take the thing not just for immortality, but they'll also be probably taking it like they did during the CVD disease era to try to save themselves from whatever epidemic is going on, like monkeypox, for example. But monkeypox isn't really a pandemic or an epidemic. It doesn't spread. It's not a viral. It's not a airborne virus. But it'll spread easily with the people who have had their immune system compromised and messed up because of having taken this, begins with an MR, ends with the NA thing. Now, this connection of 322% is also 1,176 days. And 1,176 is the 44 plus fourth triangular number. And God is using these fours in his signs, and he relates them to Paul Simon. In other words, Paul Simon's signs involve the number 4 often because of one of the trumpet judgments that follow the sound of silence in heaven, which involves the demons crossing over the bridge from the demonic realm into the earthly realm after the door is opened with a key. Well, music composition uses keys. Paul Simon is considered the GOAT, greatest of all time of music, popular music composition and lyrics. In a way, he's considered that. And anyway, the door that's opened with the key is why the number 4, because the 4th letter of the Hebrew alphabet is the symbol for a door. And we get the 4th letter of the Greek alphabet, delta, from this. The word delta comes from dalat, the word for the 4th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. It just so happens that the demons will be crossing over into the earthly realm, and as described in that trumpet judgment, will demonically possess people. And that will be the result of delta brainwaves, which is why delta, the 4th letter of the Greek alphabet. Those delta brainwaves will be triggered by frequencies, and that's what music is. That's why Paul Simon is a music, that's why God is using him. It's for the music frequency symbolism, these frequencies that travel through the air, because in the Bible it is said from Paul that Satan is the prince of the power of the air. So it's symbolic that the triggering of the demonic possession will come from the 5G frequencies that will trigger the components that have been put into people from the mark of the Antichrist thing that will get into their brain and act as some sort of transistor that will facilitate delta brainwaves, which will engender demonic possession. Anyway, that's why the 44 plus 4th triangular number, because God also repeats a number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. So that's the other a second witness to this number of days right here. The fact that it's the 44 plus 4, well, that's what this number is actually, sorry. But this number in itself, this 44 plus 4th triangular number, is a second witness to this 322% of a year. By the way, a triangular number is a triangle of numbers, and the last number in the 44 plus 4th row is this number, 1,176. And by the way, speaking of second witnesses, this is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter, as the Bible says is required. And this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination, and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. All right, that will wrap it up for this video here. But I'll just add that on the subject of second witnesses, these connections to these other monkeypox dates are second witnesses to everything that I've been explaining in this video. And the prophetic sign that was this RFK Jr. cancellation of 22 contracts sign. Okay, that should have been clear. I just want to point out, though, that that's how God's big picture of signs works. That's why these connections. And God's prophetic signs cannot be fully or properly understood without their connections and context with the other prophetic signs. And so that's why these connections provide second witnesses. We go back to these other symbolic dates for the monkeypox, and we get confirmation, profound confirmation of the RFK Jr. sign.
Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived. And more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or two that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. In the last days, many people who claim to be a follower of Christ will have spiritual experiences that are in reality demonic. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus.
Do not listen to or follow the example of most quote-unquote Christians. Instead, follow the teachings of Jesus, which most quote-unquote Christians ignore. Like Jesus, you must surrender your life. Put nothing ahead of Jesus, your Lord. Like Jesus, you must lay down your life so that you may live. As Jesus said, one must die first, like a kernel of wheat going into the ground, in order to then grow and produce fruit. And like Jesus said, one must produce fruit, or else like a branch or a tree not producing fruit, they will be thrown into the fire.
Jesus was speaking to quote-unquote Christians when he said this.
One must die the self in order to be born again. And like Jesus said, one must be born again to enter the kingdom. Like Jesus, you must sacrifice your life for the sake of the coming kingdom. It means to do work that involves some form of sacrifice and risk. To have faith does not mean to intellectually agree. You need to demonstrate your faith through taking action.
To have faith means to trust in God's promises. Taking action demonstrates trust and fear of the Lord.
The primary reason that the wrath of God is coming upon America is quote-unquote Christians that do not get what I have just explained. The only reason a Christian is alive is in order to help other people become Christians and make it to the kingdom.
Do not be deceived by those on the political left claiming to be quote-unquote Christians. There is no such thing as a Christian on today's political progressive left. Jesus said, "Do not think I have come to abolish or change any bit of the law or the prophets of the Old Testament Bible." In other words, the God of the Old Testament Bible is the exact same God of the New Testament Bible. It is essential that you learn about the God of the Bible and his ways. The God of the Old Testament Bible is looking to see who will fear him, and to fear God is not the same thing as quote-unquote revering or honoring God. Through Christ's ransom payment, a Christian is someone who has been redeemed and freed from slavery to sin and Satan. In response, a true Christian recognizes that their life in this world does not belong to them, and they become a willing slave to Jesus for the sake of the kingdom. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. And don't only put the link to this video or another video on this channel in comments sections of places you typically visit, but importantly, put the link to the video in places you never visit, where people who don't think like you visit. If you are a quote-unquote Christian, nothing in terms of an evangelism tool compares to this video with its prediction. It is a massive bag of gold. Beware of Jesus' warning through the quote-unquote Christian that did nothing with his bag of gold and was banished to hell. Also, read Ezekiel chapter 3 and 33 for this same warning. If you think you might be spending too much time watching videos instead of working and sacrificing for the kingdom through handing out flyers and potentially helping hundreds of people in the same length of time as a video, My flyer is filled with amazing information that people need to know right now, and it points people to the video channel. Now is not the time to be handing out typical evangelical tracts that are largely based in error anyway, such as, quote, Jesus loves you, unquote, for example. You can hand out the flyer on busy street corners, put them on car windshields in busy parking lots, and put them in mailboxes. Just send the file to your local print shop. You can download the file from the website. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, asteroidprediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the Odyssey.com or Rumble.com channel, and do it now in case you aren't able to later.